Hello and welcome to Greywood Gardening. Well, fall has come to Greywood and it has been a beautiful fall this year. You honestly couldn't ask for better weather, and even our oaks are turning these lovely shades of orange and red rather than going straight to brown as oaks so often do here in Zone 4, Minnesota. Now I'm taking advantage of the changing colors to go out and identify the maple trees here at Greywood. Most of the trees on Greywood are oaks and birch and some poplar, with a handful of other varieties sprinkled in, including just a handful of maple trees. And what I am hoping to do is next spring come out and tap the maple trees and try my hand at making my own maple syrup, because I think that would be super awesome. Unfortunately, in spring, when there's no leaves on the trees, I cannot tell the difference between a maple and an oak and an elm. So I'm going out now. I'm going to measure the trunks to make sure that they're large enough that it's safe to tap the tree. From what I've read on the internet, it seems like 12 inches in diameter is generally how big you want a tree to be before you can tap it, which apparently takes about 40 years. And we are about 45, a little over 45 inches in circumference. We'll cheat and get a calculator here. So the diameter, should just be circumference divided by pi. So 45, 31415. So that's a little over 14 inches in diameter. So this tree is safe to tap. So I'm going to mark it with some ribbon. So in the early spring, when I'm trekking down this path, I can easily identify which tree is the maple. All right. Now, obviously, it's not just the trees that are changing with the fall season. It's also having a huge impact on all of the gardens here at Greywood. So let's do a quick check-in and see how the gardens are doing this fall. The wildflower meadow is definitely starting to slow down now in fall. All of the volunteer grasses have gone to seed and they've turned beautiful yellow and they rustle in the wind. We still actually have an impressive number of flowers blooming. It's actually very interesting when you look at the meadow from a distance. It's actually pretty unimpressive and it doesn't look like much is going on, but once you walk out here, you can see that there's still thousands and thousands of flowers blooming. Right now, it's mostly cosmos, which we have all kinds of different shades. We have white tinged with pink, lavender, deep burgundies, everything in between, even some bright orange ones. We have what looks like some marigolds blooming, and we still have some black-eyed Susans holding on. Overall, I've been incredibly impressed with the performance of the wildflower meadow in this first year, and I'm still impressed that here we are in the beginning of October, we still have so much flowers and wildlife out here. I couldn't be more happy. Well, the cottage garden here is definitely looking a little worse for wear, and it's basically at the end of its season. The chrysanthemums were blooming beautifully for 3 weeks and looked fantastic, but they're now beginning to fade. We do have some purple-pink aster that's still in full bloom, and we have our New England aster blooming, although the New England aster is actually much taller than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be more compact like this other aster variety, so I think next year we need to move that a little further back in the garden. One thing this fall has shown me, though, is I do not have enough fall blooming flowers in the shady side of the garden. The obedient plant, which was lovely in September, I thought that was going to bloom later in the year, and it didn't, so we kind of have a big hole on that side that we'll probably want to fill in next year. I do, however, have some showy goldenrod planted all along the back side of the garden here. I started that from seed this year. It's been establishing really well, but it won't actually bloom till next year, so we won't know the full effect till next year, but either way, I think we want to get a couple more planted back there. Otherwise, it is just about time for me to start pulling up all of the annuals and cleaning up this garden. I'm going to leave all of the perennials standing. I'm not going to cut them back even after they die until next spring. And the reason is all of that dead foliage standing up will help to hold in debris and snow that'll help insulate the ground and the plant so it won't have quite as many freeze-thaw cycles. And that's particularly important for plants like the chrysanthemums, and we have some lavender that is technically zone 5 and not zone 4, but as long as it has plenty of snow cover, which this garden does because it's surrounded by driveway that gets piled on it, as long as it has enough snow cover, it'll be just fine here in zone 4. One thing that's looking fantastic in the fall is this ornamental grass. This is Miscanthus sinensis. And this was in the cottage garden, and this May I dug it up, I transplanted it here on the other side of this path, and I put a big patch of it just outside the lower terrace garden to sort of help separate visually the top of the driveway from the wildflower meadow below. It looks phenomenal. It gets this beautiful yellow and red color to the grass itself, and it has this frothy inflorescence that when the sun is behind it and it's backlit, it just glows and lights up. This is super phenomenal. I'm very excited with how well it has taken to being transplanted, and I can't wait for these clumps to just grow and expand in future years. So as you can see, the lettuce bed here in the veggie garden is doing fantastic. In fact, I have been picking leaves around the edges of most of these heads lately for salads, though I really should give them about another week to get a little bit larger. So the weather tonight is actually supposed to dip down to freezing, and it's going to do that for 4 nights in a row. The lettuce isn't going to mind that in the slightest. It's going to be fine with 31 degrees, which is what the low is supposed to be. And if anything, it's actually going to get sweeter because of it. But that is not the case for everything in the veggie garden. Some of this stuff won't tolerate a freeze at all, and other plants don't mind. So let's do a quick checkup. The bush beans are not freeze hardy at all, and unfortunately they're just now starting to produce. There are a couple of full-sized beans in here now, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of little tiny baby beans. So I think what I'm going to be doing is taking Mrs. Greywood sheets again and covering this whole mound of beans with a sheet every night for the next 4 nights in hopes that that gives it just a little bit more protection and just a couple more degrees of warmth that it needs to survive these cold nights. Because after these 4 freezing nights, it's supposed to be not freezing again for 2 weeks. Things are going to get much warmer, and so I should be able to get more beans than we will be able to eat. So trying to save the beans, even though they are not frost tolerant, although obviously I will go ahead and harvest any bean that is large enough to be harvested today. The summer squash, the zucchini, and the yellow squash are not going to survive the freeze in the slightest. And actually, as you can see, the powdery mildew has spread pretty thoroughly through this bed. So we need to harvest all of the zucchini that's here. In fact, there's some really big ones. We need to harvest everything that's here. Then I'm going to pull up the plants, bag them in plastic bags, because I don't want this powdery mildew going into the compost. And then that is the end of the summer squash for this year. The hot peppers are definitely not going to survive a freeze. So I'm going to have to come through, harvest everything I can. There's a ton of jalapenos on here, and then the plants are going to go in the compost. The bell peppers are the exact same story as the hot peppers. They're not going to survive. We have to harvest everything that there is to harvest, but it's been a good year despite our rough start. It has been a really rough year for tomatoes, and tomato plants definitely aren't going to survive the freeze, so they are done after today. But the only tomato that we had any kind of success with was the Sun Gold cherry tomato. These Roma tomatoes haven't had a single tomato ripen on the plant, but we do have a lot of full-grown tomatoes that have been sitting here. It's just been too cold for them to actually ripen. So we will harvest all of these green tomatoes, We'll bring them inside. We'll probably toss them in a paper bag with an apple, which helps them ripen faster. Definitely a disappointing year for the tomato plants. Hopefully next year will be a much better tomato year, and I think it will be, since we'll be starting out with a garden already existing that we can plant them into. So the broccoli has been growing huge, and the leaves have definitely been getting chewed on a bunch. I've seen a lot of cabbage white moths here. That's not going to stop it from producing a crop, but it does tell me that in the future, if we're going to be growing lots of brassicas, probably going to need to get some kind of insect netting going on. That said, the broccoli is not going to mind the freezing nights that are coming up. It's not going to be that cold for broccoli, and then we'll have several more weeks ahead for it to grow. The spinach here has been doing phenomenal. It doesn't quite look like it right now because I just did another huge harvest off of this just yesterday to get a bunch of spinach for smoothies. But at this point, I think we've harvested about 2 pounds of spinach leaves out of this little bed, and it's still going strong. Spinach is not going to mind the freeze at all, and it's going to keep producing at least through the end of October. So this has been doing phenomenally and has been a huge producer. Now, on the trellis here, we have snow peas. Snow peas also don't mind the frost, but they're just now starting to bloom. And number one, I don't know how well those blossoms are going to hold up to the freezing weather. But number two, I don't know how well the pollinators are going to survive the next 4 nights of freezing weather. So I'm a little concerned that we're going to be a tad late and not end up with snow peas. We'll see. With the cold weather coming on, Mrs. Greywood is preparing to make her stew once again, which we haven't had since last year. Well, not last year, but before the summer, before the spring. A long time. So, making stew means we need carrots. Now, I direct seeded a bunch of carrots at the same time that I planted out the lettuce. And these carrots obviously aren't large enough to pull up yet. But there are just a handful of carrots that survived from when I seeded back in the end of June. And these guys are way, way too big, and I've just completely ignored them. But way too big carrots are the perfect size carrots for stew. So let's see if we can get these up. Look at the size of that. This is clearly a purple elite, a very, very large purple elite. That's a huge carrot, in fact. I think this carrot might be all we need, but I'm going to pull up another one anyway. Ooh, this one's orange. I'll pull up an orange one here. Okay, that is a pretty big orange carrot. I am pretty sure that this is Napoli. It's a Napoleon F1 hybrid from Johnny Seed. Ooh, wow, even just from a distance, this smells like hugely of carrot. So I do have one more really large carrot here, which I guess we'll wait for another day because this is all I need. Wow.
Autumn rain falling on the rooftops, calling birds of summer back south to wander. It's a chance to start again. special in the spell of the night. It's elemental. Wildflowers, perfect mess. It's the little things that make it all worth it. That make it all worth
Well, that's all I have for you on this video. Next time, we'll see how well everything survives these 4 nights of freezing temperatures, and we'll get to work on one of the most important jobs of the fall gardenade season, which is planting spring bulbs, and we'll also get in a bed of garlic. All right, well until then, happy gardening.